Hi, Neil. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Douglas?
Doing very well. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You are an author, yes?
I am. Yes. Indeed, I am.
And you've got a book out. You've got a new book called Hope City.
That's my newest book. Yeah, it actually came out this past summer solstice on June the 20th,
Oh,
20,
super. Okay.
2020.
Well, I read the information that was sent to me, and it all looks very interesting. Before we get to your book, just give us a little bit of your backstory. Tell us a little bit about, what you've been doing with your life, and
Hmm.
then we'll talk about the book.
All right. Well, I came to writing rather recently in my life. My professional career has been in the interior design business, in particular, a drapery and upholstery workroom. So I've been doing draperies and upholstery, working with fabrics for going on to my fourth decade now. So I've put quite a large portfolio of work that I've done in the New York metropolitan area. So I've always been involved in something creatively, and I was always looking for another outlet as well. And writing always appealed to me. Actually, storytelling always appealed to me. So, and I found writing about three and a half years ago, and in the past 3 years, I've published five novels.
There was something on your bio about creative writing methods described as organic. And I wasn't quite sure what that meant. Can you explain what that means?
Well, I have to say that I'm not the only one who follows this path. The way I write, I don't write with an outline. I come up with a situation. I come up with an idea. I have a sort of a clue of where I want it to go and the type of story it is, but I have no outline. So it's I say it's organic because it's really just evolves as I write. I feel that if I'm surprised in my storytelling, if I don't know what's going to happen next, my reader will also have that same experience of being surprised. So that's what I mean by organic. I write without an outline. I write as my story evolves. I don't know where I'm headed. I'm writing a book right now, and it's a process. And it's funny because every book is a different experience in terms of the creativity part, and this is no different. So it's a really enjoyable process. That's what I think I really like the most about writing is the writing part. Of course, talking about it afterwards, like we're having our conversation now, is also one of the most fun things you can do as a writer. So yeah, that's my motivation behind all this.
So you basically start from scratch. I mean, do you have any idea when you start, like characters or setting or anything
I
like
do.
that?
I start with a situation. So the book I'm writing now is a sequel to Hope City. It's called Cape Nome, so it takes place 2 years later. So I know it's going to be in Nome, Alaska. I know it's going to be my same characters, most of my same characters, my same protagonists and antagonists from Hope City. So I know that. I do some other research as I go along, finding interesting things that are around during that time, and then I go with it and see where it takes me. It is a journey.
Okay, I did see on your bio that it said that now are all of your books historical fictions?
All of them except one, the righteous one, which is my third book, is metaphysical fiction. So that has it's a sequel to the first book, A Cobbler's Tale, but it's more of a of this idea of the journey of the consciousness, though it is an adventure story at the same time, a battle between good and evil. But that's the only book that is not, I would put in the genre of historical fiction.
Okay, so when you write historical fiction, I would assume to be historically accurate somewhat, you'd have to do some research
You
to
do.
to the time period, yeah?
I do. I'll spend some time before I even start researching it. Like now, I have an idea for a book I'll be working on next, so that takes a lot of research. All my books have, especially the historical fiction ones, and even the metaphysical fiction one did as well, because I did a lot of talking and writing about Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. So I did a lot of research into that. This particular book I'm writing now about Cape Nome, I did a tremendous amount of research. I learned that Wyatt Earp ended up in Nome, Alaska in 1900 during the gold rush.
Oh.
So I thought that was quite fortuitous. And of course, Wyatt Earp is a main character in my new book. So that's fun. And you get to do some research and watch all the movies about Wyatt Earp and read a lot about him on the internet and his background. So yeah, I do before I put pen to paper, so to speak, I open up my laptop and my Google machine and I check it out, see what I can learn.
Did you watch Tombstone, the one with
Yes.
Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp?
Yes, and also watch Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner.
Oh, okay.
And both movies, I think, were made the same year, which was like they both were released in the same year. And they both were good. They both had different aspects of Wyatt Earp's life that you didn't know. So one focused on one area, and others focused on another area. It gave you a feel of who the man was. So that helped, and he was quite a character, that's for sure.
Did you have a preference to which Wyatt Earp you liked, or which one you may have modeled your Wyatt Earp in your book after?
It's neither one. No, I try not to make him the main character. So he's not a main character in the book. He's there as a secondary character. So I can't give him too much color. But he's there to support it, and we'll see what happens. I mean, he might have some more important role towards the end of the book yet. I don't know. We'll see what how much trouble my protagonist gets himself into, if he needs rescue from Wyatt Earp or not.
Okay, so I saw the sort of outline of the book, and you said it takes place in Alaska. It's during the gold rush, and it's a teenage boy who goes up there, or something like that?
Right, that's Hope City. Yeah, it takes place in 1898 in a town called Hope. It was a mining town. It still exists today. I've been up there a dozen times. I've gone up every summer for the past 12 years, except this year because of the COVID. And this was the year I was going to go up with my book. And I was going to bring my Hope City book to the people of Hope as my big, debut splash as an author, and I couldn't go. So that was disappointing, to say the least. But it's up there, and I have good friends who are out there bringing it to the people of Hope. So it tells the story of how Hope City became Hope. In the year 1898, there was a gold rush. There was two towns. One was Hope, which still exists, and the other town was Sunrise, which was a much larger town. And these two towns lived on this inlet called Turnagain Arm, which is an inlet right off Cook Inlet, not far from where Anchorage is. Anchorage did not exist in 1898, but these two cities did, Hope and Sunrise. In fact, Sunrise in 1898 was the most populous city in all of Alaska, over 8,000 people. Today it's not there, it's an abandoned city, but Hope is still around. So the way Hope got its name was a man, this is a true story, well, supposedly, it's been handed down. Someone in this unnamed town on the Turnagain Arm said, we need a name of our city. We can't exist being nameless. We have Sunrise, and we have our little city. We need a name. And they decided the next person who comes off the boat and steps onto our shore will name our city after that person. And who was this person? It was Percy Hope. So when I heard this story, it gave me the idea of writing a novel about it. So the name of my book is Hope City, The Alaskan Adventures of Percy Hope. And it's about these two teenage boys from San Francisco. And one of them takes the alias of Percy Hope, and he's my protagonist. And it's as he gets there, it's like a trip down the rabbit hole. He finds all these bizarre things that start to happen to him over his summer, 3 months that he's up there in Alaska, and he has quite an adventure. And that's what takes place during the gold rush. Of course, you had the gold rush in 1896 through 98 in the Klondike, which was in Canada. And then in 1898, and a couple of years after that, it moved to Hope and Sunrise. And then in 1900, gold was discovered by the three lucky Swedes in Nome, Alaska. And not only was it discovered in the traditional way in creeks, but it was also discovered on the beach in the sand. And there was 30,000 people that flocked to Nome, Alaska in 1900, where there was nobody a couple of years before. It was just a desolate place. And people pitched tents along the beach for miles and miles, as far as you can see, digging in the sand, pulling out gold. And so that's the story I'm working on next. Will probably be published sometime later this year.
I assume all of this activity in Alaska took place in the summertime only.
Yeah, well, the gold mining did. People did live there in the winter. Surprisingly, it's not as brutal as one thinks, especially down in Hope, because you get some little bit of the warmer temperatures coming off the Gulf of Alaska and the Pacific Ocean. Up in Nome, however, it is brutal. Wintertime up there is quite brutal. I've been to Alaska in the winter just once, and it is very trippy to be there. It has all these, everything, mounds and mounds and mounds of snow, of course, piled everywhere, and the way the ice breaks, and because there's a lot of currents in the inlets there, and they all like jig jag of ice, glacier icebergs everywhere. So. Yeah, there's life in Alaska in the wintertime, and people think of Alaska as some like the North Pole. It's almost the North Pole, but it's not quite. In fact, Nome is just south of the Arctic Circle. So you're not even at the Arctic Circle when you're in Nome. You don't have much further to go to get there, but it's still south of the Arctic Circle.
I did an interview on my podcast a while back with a guy named Rick Ness, who's on the show Gold Rush. Have you seen that show on Discovery?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And he was one of the stars of the show. Nice guy. And he kind of explained to me the actual process. But I imagine back in those days, it was, now they've got machines and they've got all kinds of stuff. But back then, what did they have to actually...
We'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Well, in Hope, they mined with they did placer mining, which was with a pan, where they dug a shovel into the gravel and they dumped it into a pan, and then they swirled it around, and gold is heavier than anything else, so that would sink to the bottom. That was one way. They have what was called rocker boxes, or a sluice box, where you would dump it into a wooden box, and they would put like a carpet down at the bottom so that would catch the gold, and it's quicker than placer with using a pan. But what's interesting is at that time they introduced hydraulic mining, where they used pressure. They ran pipes from streams to creeks up above into the mountains, and had high pressure hoses with big cannons shooting high pressure water at the embankments, blowing the embankments to smithereens to get down to the bedrock. And they set up these big sluice boxes that would catch the water that was going down. So it was much more efficient than, putting a shovel or a pick into the ground. But the devastation that they left in its wake, was just horrible. So they blew a lot of the embankments along the creeks to smithereens, as I said. And actually now they're even repairing it. The Forest Services in Alaska are repairing this devastation that was done to the earth. Another point I bring out too in the book is the fact that I have indigenous life in Hope at the same time. And of course, before the white man came, the gold was just laying there on the ground, and indigenous people would never think of picking it up. What they believed was, if it's in the ground, it should stay in the ground.
Right.
And if you think about that in terms of history, if we kept everything in the ground where it's supposed to be, I think we'd be better off as a species. It's pretty good advice, because the indigenous people respect the earth, and we want to, exploit the earth.
Well, it's very true. It's very true. I think we would be living a completely different lifestyle as human beings if we left everything in the ground.
Exactly.
That's for sure. We do have to wrap this up. Our 15 minutes just blew right by. Thank you for coming on the show. Do you have a website you want to tell quickly?
Yes, I do. NeilPerrygordon.com. Just go to that, Neil, Perry, Perrygordon, NeilPerrygordon.com. And everything is right there. You find all my links, all my blogs, and interesting things about my books.
Super. Well, thank you for coming on again. Best of luck with